Every student perceives learning tasks differently. CAST research scientist Samantha Daly describes the affective demands inherent in reading.
When we think about social emotional learning as a curriculum or as a topic of study in classrooms, that's important. We also think about how in general instruction it would be important for educators to think about how any instruction is both emotional and cognitive at the same time. And so considering the role of emotions is not something to be sort of relegated to a social emotional learning program, but instead is something to think about all the time, constantly, in terms of how you're presenting a given activity or just understanding how students are interpreting what's going on in a classroom. You could think about even a single task. Let's take something that happens across classrooms all day long. You're asking students to read a given passage to start to learn about a topic. So you hand out a handout, or they have a copy of a book, and they're asked to read pages X to Y, and if you think about how that activity, of course, presents challenges and opportunities cognitively, and we all are familiar with the kinds of barriers that might be presented by being asked to decode and comprehend a given text. But when you stop and think about the emotional aspects of that task, you get a much richer picture of what's being asked of a student. So a student is coming into that task of being asked to read these 3 paragraphs, let's say, with a whole history of having been asked to read lots of paragraphs up until this point. And that's going to necessarily color their emotional response and their appraisal to this activity. And because of what we know about how appraisals affect your ability to think and learn, the nature of that appraisal being more positive or more negative, or let's say more challenged or more threatened, is going to affect your ability to read and comprehend successfully. So we can think about the background experiences and prior knowledge affecting appraisals, but we can also think about how the task is introduced, what the stakes are, what the kinds of feedback opportunities are, what supports are in place, and that same task of reading through and understanding 3 paragraphs can start to feel like actually there's a lot of opportunity to think not only about the sort of cognitive types of supports and resources and strategies that you might put in place, but also about the emotional kinds of supports and strategies you might provide for students. So if you know a student is going to come in likely with a given kind of appraisal, you might want to set up the task in such a way to make it clear that this is actually a supported environment, or to emphasize the fact that this is low stakes, or to think about the kinds of feedback you're giving such that it's a learning opportunity rather than a performance or judgment kind of opportunity. There's all sorts of opportunities to reshape a single task from an emotional perspective as well as from a cognitive or academic strategy kind of perspective.